Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When one man set out to build his dream off-grid home on the edge of a suburban fortress, he didn't expect sabotage, corruption, and a ruthless HOA queen. What started as a construction project turned into a viral war for justice and a revolution against petty power. I bought the land on a Tuesday morning in mid-March. 13 acres of rugged, sun-beaten Arizona dirt at the edge of Sierra Mirage, one of those HOA-governed suburban fortresses where the paint swatches are regulated more strictly than gun ownership. My plot sat just outside the invisible fence, technically not under their rulebook. That technically would soon become a loaded word. I wasn't some rich outsider parachuting in with eco-pipes and progressive dreams. I'd spent over a decade building a career as an architect and engineer, specializing in off-grid autonomous living systems, solar hydrogen hybrids, gray water reclamation, battery-integrated concrete. This was my language. After landing a few major government contracts and licensing some of my tech, I finally had enough cash to build the damn thing for myself. A personal prototype, my legacy, my home. The land was perfect, flat, well-positioned for solar gain, with just enough isolation to feel like freedom. I filed every permit, checked every environmental box, coordinated with the Maricopa County Planning Board, even sat through 3 public hearings where retirees with HOA name tags asked me if my solar array would cause migraines. I smiled, stayed, polite, and answered their questions with graphs. The first week on site felt like vindication. Excavators moved in, foundation footings were cut, a portable solar array fed our site tools, and materials started arriving like clockwork. I had a contract with a well-rated construction supplier out of Surprise, Arizona. Nothing fancy, but dependable, or so I thought. Day 9, concrete truck never shows. No call, no explanation. When I ring them, I get some poor intern stammering about route confusion and dispatch errors. Next morning, we find our extension cables sliced, cleanly, right at the plug heads. Not chewed, not torn, cut. Generators mysteriously fail the following day, traced back to sugar poured into the gas tanks. At first, I considered coincidence. Arizona's brutal sun fries logic out of your brain if you stand still too long. But 4 coincidences in 2 weeks? That's sabotage dressed in khakis and a clipboard. So I pulled the plug on the supplier and replaced the crew. I wasn't about to let someone screw up the dream I'd been designing since I was 25. A friend recommended a firm called Building Core LLC. They had decent-looking references, mostly commercial jobs. Their rates were higher, but they promised 0 downtime and full job site management. I was already behind schedule. I signed. Things improved, at first. The new crew was punctual, clean, polite. They showed up in matching shirts and branded hats, which should have been my first warning sign. Real contractors are allergic to uniforms, but they smiled, nodded, and spoke like they'd read OSHA guidelines out loud to each other over beers. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Then the weird delays started again. They'd blame wind warnings when the weather was dead calm. Forms for wall pours were misaligned by a full foot. The insulation batch was lost in transit twice. They kept missing inspection filing deadlines, even though I personally reminded the foreman. He'd shrug and say, "Permit office is backed up, man." Except it wasn't. I checked. Then came the offhand comment. One of the laborers, a guy named Miguel, was chatting with my electrician and laughed. "Karen says this guy's not going to last a month." He said it like it was a joke, but the name snapped into my skull like a mousetrap. Karen. Every HOA has one. The queen bee. Wears tennis skirts in December, sends emails with subject lines in all caps, probably the same woman who glared at me during the zoning board meeting. Blonde bob, pearl earrings, and a face that puckered like she'd tasted vinegar every time I spoke. That night, I started digging. Building Core LLC was registered out of Peoria, Arizona. The listed owner, one Robert Jenkins. A LinkedIn search showed a Bob Jenkins married to drumroll Karen Jenkins, vice president of the Sierra Mirage HOA. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces weren't just fitting. They were duct taped together in neon. So let me lay it out. I bought legally zoned land, hired permitted contractors, and started construction on an autonomous home entirely outside the jurisdiction of Sierra Mirage. And somehow, from the moment I poured the footings, someone kept stepping on the brakes. Someone who believed my very existence next to their rulebook neighborhood was an offense worth killing a dream over, but I wasn't going anywhere. Not without a fight. By the end of week 5, things were starting to smell like a mix of diesel fumes, stale coffee, and bullshit. The new crew from Building Core LLC, those overly polite, suspiciously coordinated workers, were still showing up, but they were getting slower. Every task dragged. First, it was a missed pour because of unexpected moisture in the soil. In Arizona. In April, then a delay on framing because of strong winds. Despite the American flag on my truck hanging limply like a dead fish, the site had become a slow-motion mess. No one's tools were missing, but materials were. A pallet of SIPs, structural insulated panels, went from delivered yesterday to can't find it on the manifest in the span of 24 hours. And then they tried to charge me for the replacements. Every day brought a new excuse, and I was hemorrhaging time and money. At first, I tried to play it cool, keep communication open. I'd show up early, bring donuts, ask questions. The foreman, a guy named Luke, always had that same relaxed, unreadable expression, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. "We're on it, Clint. Just a hiccup. Happens on every site. Hiccups don't cost tens of thousands of dollars." Then came the moment that shattered any illusions I had left. I was walking past the crew trailer to check on some conduit that was supposed to go into the slab pour. The door was cracked, and I heard someone laughing. "She really said that?" one of them asked. Another voice, muffled but clear enough, replied, "Yeah, man, Karen said this guy's not going to last more than a month. She's already got plans for the land." I stopped cold. No one saw me. I backed away like I'd stepped on a rattlesnake and made my way to my truck. My jaw clenched so tight I could hear my molars grinding. Karen again. Always Karen. And now she had her hands inside my damn crew. That night, I did what any modern man does when he's losing a war he didn't sign up for. I drank whiskey and started cyber-stalking people. Building Core LLC's website was generic, the kind of site that gets thrown together in 45 minutes using stock photos and vague promises. But the back-end domain registration listed under Jenkins Holdings LLC. The same name appeared in Karen Jenkins's voter registration records. Her husband, Bob, was the registered agent. I traced it all, the company, the HOA board, and my construction site, like a snake swallowing its own tail. I wasn't just being sabotaged. I was being surveilled. The next morning, I installed cameras. Not the cheap crap you get at Home Depot. I had 6 motion-triggered units, all solar-powered, with night vision and off-site cloud backup routed through Starlink. I buried one inside a pile of lumber. Another I mounted in a birdhouse. A third, my favorite, was disguised as a pressure gauge on the water tank. I also installed 2 decoys, bright white plastic domes with blinking red lights and obvious fake wiring. Let them smash those. The real eyes were invisible. The crew didn't comment on the cameras. Luke gave them a glance and said nothing. But I noticed something different that day. The men were quieter, more cautious, as if they sensed the rules of engagement had shifted. 3 days later, I came back from a supply run and found the site empty. Not quiet, empty. No workers, no tools, no trucks. Just a busted electrical box, a shattered portable generator, and tire tracks leading out onto the access road. They were gone. No calls, no messages, no invoice. Just a half-finished structure and a half-dead dream. But they forgot one thing. The cameras were still rolling. They thought they erased everything. I stood at the edge of the site that morning, staring at the mess like a man surveying the wreckage after a controlled demolition gone wrong. Tools were gone, wiring ripped out, boxes busted open. My backup generator had been split open like a goddamn piñata. Someone had taken a hammer to the backup battery cabinet and then dumped sand inside the inverter boxes for good measure. But none of that is what made my stomach drop. The cameras, both the dummy domes and the hidden ones, were mangled. The 2 obvious ones were completely smashed. One had a crowbar still lying beneath it. The birdhouse cam was cracked, the lens split. Even the pressure gauge cam had been unscrewed and stomped. That meant they knew. Someone told them where to look. They thought they were smart, but they didn't know how the system worked. All 6 cameras, smashed or not, were hardwired to transmit to my off-site server via Starlink the second they sensed motion. They didn't need to survive. They just needed to see. And they saw everything. I sat in my truck with my laptop open, heart pounding as I scrubbed through the footage. Timestamp 7:42 a.m. A white F-250 rolls onto the property. No logos. Two men get out wearing neon green safety vests, standard issue construction camouflage. They walk up to the gate, test the lock, then cut it clean with bolt cutters. No hesitation, no pause. They've done this before. Next angle, one of them walks the perimeter while the other calls someone. I zoom in on his mouth. No audio, but I can read lips when I need to. We're in. Soon, a second truck shows up. Then a third. 4 men, all built like gym rats with prison habits. They move fast, organized, not just sabotage, removal. They load up solar panels, aluminum framing sections, even sealed boxes of cabling. One guy grabs a pry bar and starts cracking open crates of my lithium battery components. Another smashes the junction boxes connected to the solar conduit. One tosses a hammer through the base station of the Wi-Fi antenna for good measure. They hit the cameras last. On one feed, I watched a guy stare directly into the birdhouse lens. He squints, then swings. The screen goes black. The last frame, clear as day. His face, no mask, nothing. Just a smirk like he was doing a favor for his sister's HOA meeting. They thought they cleaned the crime scene. I had license plates, faces, time-stamped footage, and, cherry on top, a shot of the whiteboard inside one of the trucks. Written in red dry erase marker, remove comm gear, seize orders. See, not subtle, I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I spent 12 hours downloading, tagging, sorting the footage into a neat little dossier, and then uploaded it all to 2 cloud services and an encrypted backup drive I mailed to myself. Chain of custody. I'd seen what happened to whistleblowers who didn't think ahead. Next morning, I walked into the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office like I was going to war. The deputy at the front desk asked me what I was reporting. I told him, organized criminal trespass, property destruction, and theft. He raised an eyebrow. I handed him a flash drive. Watch that, I said, then we'll talk. They watched. All of it. By noon, I was sitting in a private room across from 2 detectives, a legal liaison, and a guy from the Property Crimes Task Force who looked like he hadn't smiled since dial-up. I gave them everything, the invoices, the footage, the company registry, the connections between Building Corps and the HOA board. I even handed over the emails I'd found from Karen Jenkins, sent from her Sierra Mirage HOA email, requesting containment of unauthorized development adjacent to our community. Containment. Jesus. They asked if I was pressing charges. I laughed. That's just the start. By evening, my inbox was exploding. Someone had leaked the footage. I didn't do it. I swear on every circuit in that solar array. But someone did. Maybe someone in the department. Maybe someone who was sick of Karen's bullshit. Maybe just someone who thought the world deserved to see what HOA warfare looks like in real life. Local news picked it up first, then regional, then national. Headline, Architect's Sustainable Home, Sabotaged by HOA Thugs. And he caught it all on camera. I got a message that night from an old college buddy who worked in media law. He said, "You're viral. Don't say anything dumb." Too late. I had plans. The morning after the footage went viral, my inbox looked like a bomb went off in it. I had over 200 unread emails. Journalists, legal firms, 2 podcast hosts, 1 lunatic asking if I'd consider turning my land into a sovereign micronation, flag and all. But the email that mattered came from Deputy Elkins, time-stamped 6:12 a.m. Subject: We've confirmed the identity of 3 suspects, arrest warrants in progress. I didn't crack a smile. Not yet. This wasn't a win. Not yet. By midday, my phone lit up again, this time from a number I recognized. Abigail Tran, civil rights attorney. We'd crossed paths briefly at a conference about zoning abuse and property rights a couple years back. Smart, sharp, and the type who could eviscerate someone in court with a 3-word sentence. She was short and direct. "Clint, I saw the footage. This is textbook abuse of power under color of authority. If what you're telling me about HOA connections pans out, we're talking triple exposure, civil, criminal, and regulatory." I said 2 words. I'm in. We met that afternoon with a construction fraud investigator she trusted. He reviewed my documentation, then raised his eyebrows. "You understand this was a coordinated operation, right? Not just vandalism. This was premeditated disruption of a lawful construction project. You can prove financial damages." I slid the spreadsheet across the table. He nodded. "Oh yeah, this is going to be ugly." Perfect. I gave them everything. The contractor linked to Jenkins Holdings, the photos, the footage, the suspicious disappearance of Building Corps' website, already offline by then. They were scrubbing, but too late. I had screenshots, domain records, old cached pages, and, my favorite, an archived hiring ad from 3 months ago for discrete site resolution specialists. No lie, that's what it said. While my legal team got to work, I focused on the counterattack. I didn't just want to win in court. I wanted the public to understand what happens when petty tyrants in HOA polos think they're above the law. So I launched a site, hofaxnow.org. First page, my story. Photos, video, timeline. Second page, a submission portal for other people's HOA horror stories. I figured I'd get a few dozen responses over a month. I got 400 in the first 48 hours. Retired vets evicted for flag displays. Single moms fined for letting their kids draw chalk on the sidewalk. One guy told me his HOA tried to ban wheelchair ramps for aesthetic non-compliance. People were pissed, and now they had a rallying point. Then came the media. Fox 10 Phoenix ran a full 10-minute special on my case. KPNX followed with a panel discussion about HOA overreach. By the end of the week, I was standing in front of a green screen doing a remote interview with a national anchor who called me the Solar Cowboy. I hated it. My friends loved it. My enemies probably did too, for different reasons. But the big one? A week later, Channel 9 Investigates aired part 1 of their new segment, HOA Under Fire, The Power Problem. They didn't just interview me, they pulled public records on Sierra Mirage, and they found gold. Over the past 5 years, 17 homeowners in and around the HOA's buffer zone had filed complaints against the board. Most were silenced or bought out, but now their stories were part of a national narrative. One of those homeowners, a retired librarian named Judith Collings, reached out. She'd been forced to sell below market after years of anonymous fines and noise complaints. She mailed me a scanned letter dated 2 years ago. It was a warning from Karen Jenkins. Sierra Mirage does not welcome incompatible projects or residents. Goddamn poetry. Then came the cherry on top. An anonymous Reddit user posting under the handle Sunburned Teishi dropped photos of the exact same white F-250 from my footage, parked in Karen's driveway the night before the attack. Same busted fender, same crooked mirror. It went viral. By now, the sheriff's department had arrested 2 of the 4 men from the footage. One had priors. The other was a licensed contractor with expired insurance. Neither talked, yet. But it didn't matter. The pressure was building. And Karen, she'd gone silent. No press statements, no emails, no HOA bulletins. She was either lawyering up or prepping her next move. I wasn't waiting. My attorneys filed a civil suit in Maricopa County Court. 3 targets. Sierra Mirage, HOA, for civil rights violations and intentional interference. Building Corps, LLC, for construction fraud and negligence. Karen Jenkins, personally, for conspiracy, property damage, and defamation. Total claim value, $2.4 million. I didn't expect to get it all, but I damn sure wasn't settling for less than justice. 3 days after filing the lawsuit, I got a knock on my door. Not a phone call, not an email. A knock. It was just past 7 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot, half-dressed, holding a mug that said, "My house, my rules," which suddenly felt more like a battle cry than a joke. I opened the door and found 2 deputies standing there, and between them, handcuffed, was one of the guys from the footage. The one who'd looked straight into my hidden camera with that cocky little smirk. His name was Eli Torres, built like a linebacker and about as expressive as drywall. Except now he looked like someone who'd just realized the pool he cannonballed into was filled with concrete. One deputy handed me a card and said, "You'll be contacted by the county attorney's office. Mr. Torres has agreed to cooperate." I blinked. Cooperate with what? The second deputy glanced at me with a half grin. With everything. Turns out Eli wasn't just a hired hand. He was Karen's husband's half-brother, fresh out of a plea deal for burglary and on probation. He'd taken the job as site cleanup through a cash deal with Building Corps. Only after he saw his face plastered across every news outlet from Phoenix to Portland did he realize he was about to become the HOA's sacrificial goat. So he flipped. The sheriff's office got a full debrief. Dates, times, payments. But the real gold came from the audio recording he had stashed on his phone, probably insurance in case things went sideways. In the recording, Karen is speaking. Her voice is crisp, clear, and unmistakable. "We're not going to let him finish that house. If he's allowed to build, it opens the gate. Others will follow. We'll lose control. You get in there. You remove what you can. Cameras, panels, wires, clear it. I don't want anything usable left. Another voice, male, older, asks, what if he reports it? By the time he proves anything, we'll have enough environmental violations stacked to get the site condemned. The recording ends with a laugh. You ever feel pure fury and cold vindication hit at the same time? Like watching someone light your house on fire while standing next to a sprinkler system you installed just the week before. I forwarded everything to my legal team. Within hours, we submitted the audio as part of our evidence for an injunction hearing. But that wasn't the only thing Eli gave up. He also described a whiteboard mounted inside the HOA clubhouse meeting room labeled Mitigation Priority List. It was essentially a hit list of residents the HOA wanted gone. My name was at the top. Others included a retired woman who raised chickens too visibly in her backyard, a man who ran a mechanic shop from his garage, fully permitted by the county, but deemed aesthetically disruptive by the board, a couple who painted their front door teal, 17 names total. Eli even drew the layout of the board, said Karen would erase names once people caved or moved out. I contacted Judith Collings, the retired librarian who'd written me earlier. She nearly broke down when I read her name from the list. She agreed to testify, as did two others. The case wasn't just about me anymore. Meanwhile, the press circled like hawks. Channel 9 dropped part 2 of their HOA expose, The List, featuring excerpts from the recording, interviews with former Sierra Mirage residents, and archival footage of Karen Jenkins giving a 2018 HOA presentation titled Preserving Community Integrity Through Vigilance. The framing? Chilling. The HOA wasn't a management entity anymore. It was a political machine operating like a private government. After that, the County Ethics Committee issued a formal subpoena to Karen, as well as Robert Bob Jenkins, her husband and co-registrant of Building Corp LLC. And then, the truly fun part began. Building Corp's financials, once sealed, got pried open by court order. What did we find? Unauthorized transfers from the HOA's discretionary funds. Weekly payments labeled as contractor consultation fees wired to a bank account in Bob Jenkins's name, over $80,000 in the past 9 months. And where did some of that money go? To pay Eli and the other muscle-bound idiots who tore through my site. That's when the fraud charges landed. The Jenkins household went quiet. No HOA bulletins, no legal denials, no desperate PR attempts. They were drowning, and they knew it. But it still wasn't over. That week, I received a letter from the Sierra Mirage HOA Legal Counsel demanding a cease and desist of my website, my social media posts, and any further use of the phrase criminal HOA behavior. My lawyer laughed for 2 full minutes before replying. We doubled down. There's a certain look people get when the illusion of power slips out of their hands. I saw it for the first time in court. Karen Jenkins entered the courtroom like a woman walking into her own country club. Chin high, lips pursed, dressed like Martha Stewart with a vengeance. Behind her, 2 attorneys and 1 man I recognized as the HOA's former treasurer. I say former because by then, half of the Sierra Mirage board had resigned, some quietly, some not so much. The injunction hearing wasn't the big trial. This was just the warm-up. A judge would review the evidence, my footage, the recording, the financial statements, and witness testimony, and decide whether to issue a formal order preventing any further interference with my construction. But in that tiny courtroom, with its buzzing fluorescent lights and 1 coffee-stained ceiling tile, the walls started closing in on Karen. The prosecution played the recording. At the word containment, I watched her blink, just once, but her lawyer immediately objected, overruled. Then the footage from the birdhouse cam. Faces, license plates, metal crowbar connecting with my battery box. Eli Torres's testimony was read into the record. The judge didn't say much, just tapped a pen quietly as the evidence piled up. And when the financial spreadsheet was laid out, showing HOA community funds rerouted through dummy invoices to Building Corp LLC, the treasurer cracked. Right there, in the middle of the hearing. Said he thought they were community outreach grants. His voice cracked on the word grants. The judge granted the injunction. Effective immediately, no one affiliated with Sierra Mirage HOA, past or present, was allowed within 100 yards of my property without a court order. Any further interference would be treated as criminal contempt. Karen didn't flinch, but I could see it. Her nails were digging into the folder in front of her like she was trying to bore a hole through the table. I walked out of the courtroom lighter than I'd felt in months. But outside the courthouse, I found something that brought the weight right back. A group of residents from Sierra Mirage had gathered on the sidewalk, holding signs, but not against me, against her. Not in our name. HOA not equal to private police. We want our community back. One woman, maybe in her 60s, approached me cautiously. She introduced herself as Linda Ortega, a longtime resident who'd been quietly recording HOA meetings for months. She had minutes, emails, and screenshots, all showing Karen and Bob railroading dissenters, issuing fines without proper votes, and denying homeowners access to board agendas. She handed me a flash drive. I don't like what she's turned us into. Inside, there were recordings of Karen instructing volunteers to strategically observe homes marked as priority properties, including mine. She even suggested escalation if owners failed to respond to diplomacy. It was surveillance. Creepy, suburban-grade surveillance, and now it was evidence. My attorneys were giddy. At the same time, my inbox was still blowing up. HOA Facts Now had surpassed 10,000 subscribers. The public was pissed, but more importantly, motivated. Victims from around the country started sending us their HOA horror stories. A group from Nevada formed an action committee. A retired Marine in Texas sent us a video walking through his front yard, which had been spray painted by his HOA with the word violation. I kid you not. Then, just when I thought the wheel had completed its first revolution, a new twist dropped. A group of anonymous residents leaked internal HOA emails to Channel 9 Investigates. Again, this batch spicier than all the rest. In one, Karen refers to non-compliant homeowners as infection nodes. In another, she discusses media containment strategies if the situation goes federal. But the worst was a spreadsheet with 3 tabs. Tab, priority expulsions. Tab, legal leverage targets. Tab, noise campaign strategies. Noise, campaign, strategies. They were literally organizing psychological pressure campaigns against residents, barking dog complaints, anonymous noise reports, HOA-approved community health inspections timed for when residents were away. That spreadsheet was the nuclear option, and the FBI took notice. No knock on my door this time, just a polite call from a field agent who wanted to better understand the broader context of local governance, overreach, and abuse. In plain English, they were building a racketeering case against Karen, Bob, and potentially others in the HOA network they were connected to. Turns out Sierra Mirage wasn't the only HOA doing this. Karen had been coordinating with 3 others in nearby developments, exchanging tactics, templates for violation letters, and even persuasive talking points for neighborhood meetings. This wasn't just petty tyranny anymore, it was organized, and it was unraveling fast. They froze the HOA's accounts on a Thursday. I found out not from the sheriff, not from my lawyer, but from a panicked phone call at 6 in the morning from a Sierra Mirage resident who somehow got my number. They shut it all down, the voice said breathlessly. Bank froze the HOA general fund. Maintenance stopped mid-shift. The landscaping contractor left his mower on the tennis court and just walked. I pulled up the Maricopa County case docket. There it was. A formal seizure order issued as part of a joint civil and criminal investigation into Sierra Mirage HOA's financial misconduct. $87,000 under questionable consulting disbursements. $42,000 funneled to community enforcement liaisons, a nice term for muscle, and over $120,000 listed as legal strategic development, most of which went directly to a firm Karen's cousin owned. They didn't just overreach, they drank their own Kool-Aid and tried to franchise the poison. Residents were furious. Without funding, the trash didn't get picked up. Pool filters shut off. Security gates stopped working. Emails poured in to HOA Facts Now. People wanted answers, and they weren't asking Karen anymore, they were asking me. That's when I did something even I hadn't planned for. I held a meeting. Not a protest, not a legal deposition, a town hall. I rented out the old community center just outside HOA jurisdiction, brought coffee, printed copies of the court filings, and stood in front of more than 60 Sierra Mirage residents who were confused, angry, and tired of being gaslit by a woman with a pearl necklace and a god complex. I walked them through everything: the sabotage, the video, the whiteboard list, the shell companies, the fake environmental group. I showed them the HOA's own documentation, their own words. Most people sat in stunned silence. A few cried, and when I finished, I asked them one question: "Do you want it back?" At first, silence. Then slowly, hands went up. They didn't want Karen's empire, but they wanted their community back. From her, from the fear, from the rot. A man named Thomas Griggs, an ex-cop who'd lived in Sierra Mirage for 20 years, stood up and said, "We let this happen. She didn't do it alone. We gave her the gavel and looked the other way." He got a standing ovation. That night, I filed a motion to purchase all frozen non-residential HOA assets once they were released for liquidation. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came next: the clubhouse, the tennis courts, the HOA operations annex. Everything not directly tied to someone's home was scheduled for auction in 60 days to satisfy court-ordered restitution and penalties. I made it clear to my lawyers: buy it all. While they prepared the bid, the FBI continued its sweep. Bob Jenkins, Karen's husband, was picked up outside a strip mall in Tempe. He'd been caught trying to withdraw $9,000 in cash, just under the federal reporting threshold. Real subtle. Karen? She made one last move. On a Tuesday morning, the news broke. Karen Jenkins, through her legal counsel, filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy and resigned as president of the Sierra Mirage HOA, citing mental health challenges brought on by excessive online harassment. Of said course, her statement was delivered through the same PR firm that once represented a Scottsdale politician caught embezzling highway funds. Nobody bought it. The headlines came fast and brutal. HOA Queen Falls, Karen Jenkins steps down amid fraud probe. From power broker to defendant. How a small Arizona HOA sparked a federal investigation. The solar cowboy wins again. I still hated that nickname. But I wasn't finished. With my lawyers and a nonprofit co-founder I'd met through the legal network, we drafted the charter for a legal defense and homeowner advocacy center to be housed inside the very clubhouse Karen used to hold her secret meetings. The purchase went through. I walked the grounds the day after it closed. The tennis courts were cracked, the windows dusty. The waterless fountain out front looked like a monument to dry arrogance, but it was mine now. I stood inside the main meeting room and ran my hand across the podium. There was a tiny engraved plaque still bolted to the wood, preserving order, building community. I laughed, then I left it there. We had work to do. The first time I walked into the newly reopened building, I wore the same boots I'd used during construction, still caked in desert dust. Felt right. The old HOA clubhouse still smelled faintly of stale coffee and decades of paranoia, but now the lights were on, the locks were changed, and the name outside had been replaced. A brushed steel plaque greeted visitors at the door. Homeowner Liberty Center, founded 2025, built on land they tried to bury. Inside, volunteers were setting up folding chairs, not for a hearing, not for a reprimand, for a workshop. We were holding our first free seminar, Know Your Rights, standing up to HOA overreach. There were already 30 RSVPs. I'd spent the last few weeks pouring settlement money into making this place more than just a symbol. It had 3 offices for legal aid consultations, a public resource library, a media room where people could record testimony or learn how to file complaints, and outside. What used to be the HOA's private pickleball court was being converted into a community solar demo field. One of my engineers, the same guy who helped design the water reuse system for my own home, had volunteered to install the panels pro bono. When asked why, he shrugged and said, "I like revenge that reduces emissions." Karen, meanwhile, was being arraigned after the bankruptcy court denied her motion for asset protection on account of intentional fraud and conspiracy. She was now facing state and federal charges, including racketeering, obstruction, and unlawful use of public funds. Eli Torres's cooperation bought him a lighter sentence, 18 months probation, mandatory restitution. The others took deals. Bob Jenkins pled guilty to multiple fraud counts and was sentenced to 5 years. Karen, 6 years. With a minimum of 4 before eligibility for early release. She tried to cut a deal by offering up contacts from other HOAs she'd coordinated with, but the feds already had them. The HOA cartel, as some outlets started calling it, was unraveling like cheap vinyl siding in a windstorm. The media storm didn't stop either. In one final twist of irony, Channel 9 hosted a roundtable about HOA reform, live from the former Sierra Mirage Clubhouse, now our headquarters. I stood between a law professor from ASU and a congresswoman from Nevada who had just introduced legislation aimed at increasing oversight for HOA boards across the country. Someone in the comments called it the Karen Act. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't about her anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever had their front yard weaponized against them, who got fined for growing tomatoes, who got harassed for painting their shutters beige instead of taupe, who got driven out for not kneeling before a petty tyrant with a clipboard and a god complex. 1 year after the attack on my site, the house was finished, fully autonomous, solar integrated, rainwater capture, interior cooling by geothermal loop, and no HOA in sight. I stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee, the wind pushing gently across the high desert scrub. The same wind that once carried the dust of sabotage now moved across my solar array like it was offering an apology. And down the road, a new sign was posted near the entrance to what used to be Sierra Mirage. Community Association reformed, resident council elected, HOA dissolved by vote. They voted her legacy out. Good. Let it rot.